It was November 9, 2025. The morning sky over the northeastern Philippines turned a deep shade of gray long before dawn. In the distance, the sea began to roar, a low, rolling thunder that grew louder with every passing minute. Then came the waves. Towering walls of water, churning black and white, crashing against the coast of Cagayan and Aurora with relentless fury. Streets became rivers in minutes. Entire homes vanished under the force of nature. The air filled with the sound of howling wind, shattering glass, and terrified cries echoing through the storm. People ran for safety, some barefoot, clutching children and bags of what little they could save. Cars floated like toys, trees snapped like matchsticks. From above, the city looked like it was sinking. It was chaos, pure and unstoppable. This was the arrival of Typhoon Fung Wong, the storm the world would soon call one of the most violent of the decade. 30 seconds of shocking footage captured what words could barely describe: power lines dancing like whips, roofs torn away, boats hurled inland, and the horizon disappearing behind walls of rain. The Philippines had seen typhoons before, but this was different. And yet, just beneath that terror, another name stirred memories across the country: Typhoon Uwan. Two names, two storms, one shared legacy of destruction. Many people asked, why two names? Why Fung Wong, and why Uwan? In international meteorological records, the storm was officially named Typhoon Fung Wong, a name submitted by Hong Kong, symbolizing the phoenix, a mythical bird reborn from the ashes. But locally, in the Philippines, the same storm carried a different name, Uwan. Each storm that enters the Philippine area of responsibility receives its own local name, chosen by PAGASA, the Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical, and Astronomical Services Administration. To Filipinos, Uwan simply means rain, a word that now carried the weight of fear. Typhoon Fung Wong, 2025, or Uwan as known locally, made its first landfall on November 9th, near the town of Divalacan in Isabela Province, bringing winds that reached 185 kilometers per hour, with gusts up to 230. Within hours, the typhoon swallowed villages along the eastern coast, pushing the Pacific Ocean inland. 2 days earlier, it had formed over the warm waters east of Luzon, feeding on record ocean temperatures, the same heat that scientists have warned is fueling stronger storms year after year. But the story of Fung Wong cannot be told without remembering the one that came just days before it, Typhoon Kijiji, known locally as Kalmeji, which had already claimed over 200 lives across central provinces. Just when the nation was still clearing debris, another monster was born over the Pacific. Now, with two names echoing across the news, Fung Wong and Uwan, the Philippines braced once again. In those first hours, satellite images showed a perfect, terrifying spiral stretching more than 1,600 kilometers wide, a storm system that could cover 2/3 of the archipelago. Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro Jr. called it potentially catastrophic, urging millions to flee from high-risk zones. Move now, he said on live television. When the flood starts, it's too late to be rescued. By nightfall, more than 100,000 people had been evacuated. Schools were closed, flights grounded, ports sealed. Over 300 domestic and international flights were canceled. At least 6,600 passengers and cargo workers were stranded across 86 seaports. Still, the wind didn't wait. It began tearing through the coastal towns of Cagayan and Aurora, and Quezon. In every direction, Power lines fell, lights went out, and silence gave way to the steady growl of destruction. Imagine the scene, families huddled in darkness, the sound of corrugated metal scraping against concrete, and somewhere far off, the booming crash of another house collapsing under the pressure of the wind. Emergency teams could do little but wait. Roads were cut off, communication towers snapped in half. Even the rescuers needed rescue. The president, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., declared a state of emergency as the full scale of the devastation unfolded. For many, it was déjà vu. Just 1 week earlier, Typhoon Kalmeji had washed away entire neighborhoods in Cebu and Leyte, drowning hundreds. Now, Fung Wong was battering the north, its eye crossing over Luzon with winds strong enough to uproot concrete pillars. By the time dawn broke on November 10th, the storm had moved northwest toward Isabela and Cagayan, leaving behind a trail of shattered homes, flooded farmlands, and millions without power. The wind had peeled the roofs from schools, churches, and hospitals. Helicopters from the Air Force flew above the wreckage, scanning for stranded survivors waving from rooftops. Bernardo Rafael Alejandro Ford, from the Office of Civil Defense, said about 50,000 families were forced to leave their homes in high-risk zones. In provinces like Bicol, torrents of water mixed with volcanic mud from Mount Mayon, swallowing roads in thick sludge. In Aurora, rescuers went door to door urging people to flee before the river broke its banks. Many refused, and many paid the price when the floods came. For 15 minutes, images of furious waves, submerged cities, and winds ripping through coconut plantations flash across the screen. Each one tells a piece of a much bigger story, a country caught between two storms, each one stronger than the last. Fung Wong brought not only wind but also more than 200 millimeters of rain, enough to submerge entire towns within hours. Government meteorologist Benison Estorija warned that climate change was making these storms more violent, more unpredictable. Warmer oceans, he said, are feeding the fury. Scientists confirmed it. Sea surface temperatures in the western Pacific had hit record highs, creating the perfect breeding ground for super typhoons. As the days passed, survivors emerged from what was left of their homes. In Catanduanes, an elderly woman stood in knee-deep water, holding a soaked family photo. "We lost everything again," she whispered. "First Kalmeji, now Uwan." Her words carried the grief of thousands. In Manila, the capital, rain pounded relentlessly. The Pasig River swelled, threatening to overflow its banks. The city's financial center, Makati, went dark for hours. Even the hospitals, already overcrowded from the previous storm, were struggling to keep power running. Volunteers formed human chains to pass food and medicine across flooded streets. As images of destruction spread online, the international community began to react. The United States and Japan offered emergency aid, ready to deploy teams if needed. But for now, the Philippines chose to rely on its own soldiers, volunteers, and the courage of ordinary people. Under the surface of tragedy, there was resilience. Fishermen whose boats were destroyed began repairing them the next day. Teenagers in Camarines Norte waded through waist-deep water to help carry supplies. In Aurora, rescuers found a baby alive, floating in a plastic container, a fragile symbol of hope. Still, the death toll climbed. Hundreds were injured, dozens missing. Economic losses were estimated in the billions. Crops were destroyed across central Luzon, rice fields turned into lakes. Power outages stretched for days, with some regions cut off for nearly a week. Satellite data later confirmed that Fung Wong had sustained winds comparable to 115 miles per hour at landfall, officially classifying it as a super typhoon. Meteorologists warned that it could take years for affected communities to rebuild. The Philippines, a nation of more than 7,000 islands, is no stranger to such devastation. On average, 20 storms hit the archipelago every year. But what made 2025 different was the speed, intensity, and frequency. 2 powerful typhoons in 1 week, a phenomenon once considered rare, now becoming disturbingly normal. Experts linked it directly to the global climate crisis. Warmer air holds more moisture, they explained, leading to heavier rainfall. Rising sea levels amplify storm surges, flooding low-lying villages faster than ever before. The people paying the price are those with the least resources to rebuild. Footage rolls of children playing in muddy water amid shattered homes, of soldiers delivering rice sacks by boat, of families sleeping on the floors of crowded evacuation centers. This isn't just a story about weather, it's about survival, and the fragile balance between nature's power and human endurance. Days later, when the sun finally returned, the damage became painfully clear. From the air, the land looked torn open, roads split in half, fields drowned, bridges gone. In northern Isabela, the once lush farmlands were covered in sand and debris. Cows and goats stood stranded on tiny patches of dry ground. And yet, amid the destruction, people began to rebuild. Makeshift tents turned into homes. Community kitchens emerged from school halls. Churches opened their doors to anyone with nowhere to go. The government promised funds for recovery, but everyone knew it would take months, maybe years. International headlines called it a double tragedy for the Philippines. But to those living through it, it was simply life, another storm, another test. By the end of the week, Fung Wong had weakened over the South China Sea, heading toward Vietnam. The rain stopped, but the silence it left behind was heavier than the storm itself. People walked through the wreckage in disbelief, trying to make sense of what was left. And in every conversation, the same words returned: "We will rise again." The camera pans over a landscape still soaked in water, the horizon stained gold by the setting sun. A single flag waves weakly amid the ruins, the symbol of a nation that refuses to break. This is the story of Typhoon Fung Wong, or Uwan, a storm that began as a name on a weather chart and became a scar on the heart of a nation. It's a reminder that in an age of changing climate, nature's fury knows no borders, no mercy, and no pause. And yet, it's also a story of human strength, the kind that endures when everything else is gone. Because even as the winds fade and the waters retreat, the memory remains, the moment when the world stood still, and a small island nation faced the wrath of the sea once again.